Hello everyone, this is Michael Haspel and this is Quantum Froth Dispatches. As you may guess, our numbering system is still out of whack, so this is going to be episode 6 of Quantum Froth Dispatches, even though it is part 4 of our discussion of Conan the Barbarian. Alright, let's do this. 5, 4, 3... Hands on keys, turn. What is steel compared to the hand that wields it? Look at the strength in your body, the desire in your heart. I gave you this. Such a waste. Contemplate this on the Tree of Woe. That's Thulsa Doom explaining the Riddle of Steel to Conan. And as you can probably tell if you haven't seen the movie, some bad things are about to happen to Conan. Our hero is not going to get away scot-free. In fact, he is moving very close to one of the black moments in the film. And in all storytelling, this would be the nadir point of the monomyth of the hero's journey. And we're going to bounce around on the hero's journey a little bit here. Because when we approach the middle point, it's like the bottom of the circle, because the whole hero's journey is a big circle. The end can actually be the beginning of another adventure. In fact, it reminds me of the Rankin and Bass, the Hobbit cartoon, when Bilbo is telling Gandalf, oh, I'm going to put this ring away, I'm going to set it on my mantle, and no more adventures for me, something along those lines. And Gandalf kind of answers, and it's apocryphal from the novels, but it works really well in the film. He says, oh, Bilbo, if you truly understood the nature of that ring, you'd understand that this adventure isn't ending at all. It's only just beginning. Of course, implying the whole Lord of the Rings, but of course, that kind of breaks the illusion that Gandalf doesn't know what the ring is at the beginning of the Fellowship of the Ring. So, but we're going to dance around a little bit. When we last left Conan, he had left Valeria and Subutai in Shadowzar, and they had been given a whole mess of treasure and money from King Osric to go save his daughter, and Valeria had just basically confessed to him that she didn't want to go on the adventure. Subutai also did not want to go on the adventure. They had more wealth than they could probably spend. Let's just take what we've got and quit and leave Thulsa Doom to somebody else. And, we don't need to go get ourselves killed fighting a wizard. And this is, of course, perfectly in line with Valeria being kind of queen of thieves and a rogue, if you're going to go with the D&D kind of thing. And she's pretty chaotic neutral, if you're going to go with that alignment, Subutai, I would say, is more lawful, but he's also kind of like, yeah, there's nothing in this for me. So they both decide that they're going to bail on the adventure. And that represents a part of the hero's journey, which usually comes after the first threshold. But we're going to jump around, and it's 2 parts. One of it is called Sacred Marriage, or Meeting with the Goddess. And, of course, we talked about marriage and wifing in the previous Conan episode. And Meeting with the Goddess, that is obviously Valeria. She's one of the few significant women in this film. So we've got that. But then there's also woman as the temptress. And that doesn't always mean, as a carnal temptress. Here, Valeria is tempting him away from doing what he wants. His quest is to get revenge on Thulsa Doom and kill Thulsa Doom. So she's going to tempt him away from that. And that introduces a concept called the Threshold Guardian. And we may have spoken about this before. I don't remember if I did. But when a hero is getting ready to cross a threshold into the other world, of the adventure or whatever, these Threshold Guardians will show up. They're not always enemies. And oh, by the way, these will show up in your own life. And you'll recognize some of these things. So in mostly Greek mythology, or all mythology really, when a hero decides, oh, I'm going to go down into Hades to save Persephone, well, these Threshold Guardians will show up. And they're usually lesser monsters that are just tough enough for the hero to slay, but just tough enough to turn the hero back. Cerberus is a really good example of a Threshold Guardian. They show up in all kinds of stories. In romantic comedies, the Threshold Guardian is usually the protagonist's best friend, who reveals that, oh, the object of your affection is way out of your league. So sometimes a Threshold Guardian might actually be a friend, but they're pointing out, why go on this adventure? Why do this? We're comfortable right here. We're stagnant. And the thing is, tying in with Newton's laws, people like inertia. Inertia exists, and so a body at rest will remain at rest, but then there's no story. There's no adventure. There's no hero. We don't hear about the people that, gave the ring to Gandalf and said, hey, you know what? I'm not going to go to Mordor. That sounds like a really bad time, and let somebody else do it. We don't hear about those stories. Which by the way, if you turn back from the threshold, that is essentially symbolic death. So Conan, to bring it back to that, he runs into his big Threshold Guardian, which is woman as a temptress, which is Valeria, who sits there and presents him an alternative route. We have a lot of money. King Osric says it's enough to become kings yourselves, right? So we have a ton of money. We can spend this all on just pleasure and just hanging out, and we never have to want for anything again. And Conan goes, well, I'm going to have to give that a hard no. And he leaves. We get a scene of Valeria waking up in the morning. He has left her the Eye of the Serpent, which was the big jewel that they stole from the Tower of Set, and they have headed out. So we get this nice knight errant scene that we were talking about, where Conan goes and he's just kind of exploring, trying to find where Doom's Mountain of Power is. And he gets to the mounds, meets Mako, and we talked a little bit about how Mako is this wizard, possibly a necromancer, because he hangs around this kind of mounds of the dead, and he has kind of gone around, I'm assuming it's him, but he's gone around and taken the skeletons of these warriors and kings and stuff and kind of positioned them on guard with like bits of twine or something like that, where to hold the skeletons together. And he's got what looks like an army, but they're all of skeletons and stuff. And he's playing this very, very odd character, possibly inspired by Toshiro Mifune in The Seven Samurai, because he's very, very weird. He laughs. He thinks everything is kind of funny. He's very amused by the state of the world. Almost as if he's not really a part of it. But we see later that he very much is a part of it, and he can get scared, which, if he wasn't part of the world, if he was this kind of impish character, he wouldn't be worried. He'd be more like Tom Bombadil, where the ways of the world don't affect him. But the ways of the world do, but he helps Conan out. They have this scene where, he points Conan to where he can pick up some flowers, and Conan doesn't tell him his true purpose. Conan says that the flowers are for a girl, and he gets on this camel and rides it around. And apparently they had some serious trouble with Arnold riding the camel. Like the camel kept trying to brush him off on like a 2x4 part of the set. So Conan, or Arnold rather, did not like that camel. There was no love lost between them. So as Conan approaches the Mountain of Power, now we get just hordes of the Children of Doom, these kind of pilgrims heading to the Mountain of Power. And their examples, they really remind me of kind of the hippie movement of the 60s counterculture. And very clearly, Milius, who would have grown up through all this, Milius is not a fan. And consider that one of the films he had done previous to Conan the Barbarian was actually Dirty Harry, and that kind of sets the tone for what he may think about the 60s counterculture. But there's all manner of strange things going on. People like meditating with rocks and reading auras and just doing really just strange kind of meditation exercises. And it's seen through the eyes of Conan, where he doesn't see the practicality in any of this. So while Milius isn't trying to actually poke fun at any of this, it does seem a bit ridiculous out of context, because you don't know what they're actually doing. And there's a really nice piece of music called The Procession that comes in, but it comes in a little bit after this scene. What starts happening is Conan wakes up in the morning. He's camped out there, and a whole mess of priests have come down. They're tossing robes to people, and Conan starts to get a little bit worried. He gets a look on his face like, uh-oh, maybe I've bitten off more than I can chew. Like, he starts to get worried, like, I don't know how I'm going to get up there. And we get this scene that I guess Milius, viewed in hindsight, it's a homophobic scene. There's really no way of getting around this. We get kind of this scene with a priest that comes up to Conan, and he, starts talking to him saying, hey, why don't you bare yourself? Why are you shy? You're so big and so well grown. And Conan kind of implies, hey, can we go talk over there where nobody else can see? And the priest is like, well, of course. But the way he delivers the line, it's almost like he thinks he's going to get some from Conan, and he, in a way, kind of does. We get Conan incapacitates the priest pretty quickly, and we get the only time Conan kind of consciously descends into a bit of camp, because there we get a one-liner, a typical, what we will come to know as a typical Arnold one-liner, because before this movie they really didn't exist. But the priest, he says something like, hey, are these your priest's robe? And the priest says, yeah, they're all I have. And Arnold goes, well, they're all you'll ever need, and then takes him out. It's like, we could have done without that, but that's okay. It's, it's one small thing. And then Basil Polidorus has this song that comes on called The Procession, and it's a great song. And we see Yasmina, Princess Yasmina, for the first time. Remember that this is not stated in the theatrical release or in the director's cut, but she is essentially Thulsa Doom's wife. So we see her coming out for the first time. And then Conan, who is really none too bright, he's been using the symbol of the two snakes coming together over the black sun, black moon that Thulsa Doom used to carry and that he stole from the Tower of Set. He's been using it kind of as a passport to get by every time the priests or the guards stop him. And you obviously one of the guards notices. And I just want to take a quick aside here and talk about how big these guards are. They are not regular size guys. I mean, these guys' forearms look huge, and they're wearing masks, so that's probably the same 4 or 5 guys. But what happened is when they were doing some of the test footage, some of the test fighting and everything, it just seemed unrealistic because Arnold was just so much bigger than the stunt people he was going up against. So it didn't seem realistic at all. So they had, they were like, hey, we need some bigger guys. Well, it turns out Arnold knows a lot of big guys. So they went and put out a general call for bodybuilders and brought in a bunch of guys, and they acted as raiders and as guards and stuff like that. But the guy who takes the symbol from Conan and kind of just sends him on, his forearms, he's jacked. He's a big dude. So, quick end of that aside. Of course, you got Sven Ole Thorsen playing Thorgrim and Rexor, of course. And those guys are huge. So they quickly get alerted to Conan's situation. And hey, that's the guy who stole stuff from the Tower of Set. And of course, Conan is immediately captured and beaten. He doesn't, Thulsa Doom says 2 or 3 lines and says something like, "Who among you still fears emptiness?" And then he yells out, "Infidel." And the crowd kind of just grabs, Conan gets grabbed. The whole crowd kind of just piles on top of him. There's no way he can get out. He gets beaten pretty badly. And then we get one of my favorite scenes in the entire film. And it's possibly the longest dialogue in the film, maybe tied with the throne room scene with King Osric. And it's Thulsa Doom. And he shows up, and he's just, the way James Earl Jones plays Thulsa Doom is just fantastic. And I'm gonna break into it a little bit more in a little bit. But he's just very, very casual. When he comes in, he's not put out. He's just like, they've beaten up Conan. They throw him in a fountain so he's not bleeding all over the place. And then Thulsa Doom just shows up, and it looks honestly like he's just had lunch. Like he's just, oh, okay, I'm done. What's next on the agenda? Oh, yeah, we caught that guy from the Tower of Set. I wish to speak to you now. And that's how the scene starts, and he just kind of puts him to the question and everything like that. And there's a little segue I want to talk about villainy in film. And not just in film, but in obviously storytelling in general. But in film, it's very easy because most people have seen the movies that we're talking about. And we're going to talk about another villain also played by James Earl Jones. Well, partly played by James Earl Jones. Darth Vader. And fun fact here, by the way, James Earl Jones made $7,000 for the voiceover work he did in A New Hope. And he did all of his work in 2.5 hours. So that's pretty good money if you can get it. Now, I'm sure Mark Hamill made more for The Force Awakens for not even saying a word. So that's even better work if you can get it. But one of the trends I've noticed lately, and I have to say it's only in certain films because I thought this was a thing. I thought this was an ongoing trend where the villains would just lose their cool and throw tantrums in a lot of movies. And I noticed it in the Snow White movies. I mean, Charlize Theron did a fantastic job, but it just seemed like she would lose control. She would just throw a tantrum. And there's losing control like Kylo Ren does, like General Hux does, and then there's like just getting angry, kind of like a drill sergeant would, where he's not losing control. He may be actually very angry and yelling at Private Pyle, but he is very much still in control. These new villains, and this has happened maybe in the last 5 years or so, maybe a little bit longer, but these new villains tend to lose control, and they're throwing tantrums. They're children, and they're not threatening at all. But I'm corrected. Because in Infinity War, you get Thanos. And Thanos hardly raises his voice. He's just, even when Doctor Strange tells him, oh yeah, the Maw is dead, he's just like, well, this day carried a heavy toll. He just kind of accepts it. That makes for a much scarier villain, a much more evil, a villain that is so much in control that you can't break it. And there are times where where you want the villain to lose control. One of the other films we're going to talk about is The Wrath of Khan. And there's definitely a moment in the film where Khan loses control and he throws a tantrum. But as we will talk about when we get to that, when we talk about The Wrath of Khan, Kirk tricked him into throwing a tantrum. And then Khan made a mistake. If he hadn't thrown a tantrum, he wouldn't have made a mistake. So we just keep that in mind. And James Earl Jones had a really good quote about this. He says, people tend to have too much fun with villains, and it destroys their credibility. And I think that puts it exactly right. I mean, you can see Killmonger is full of rage, but he never loses control. And he's really, really angry, but he's in control all the time. And as opposed to, say, Kylo Ren or General Hux, which you're like, the First Order is kind of a joke. Like, they're not scary. Whereas the Empire in the original trilogy were almost just bureaucrats, you know? They were just going through the motions. Even though what they were doing was horrific, it was just a job, you know? So they're like, you may fire when ready, you know, or tell Lord Vader he may commence his landing. Just kind of you know, almost like, you know, oh, there's somebody on line too. They really were unbothered by it. So we're going to jump back from that segue to villainy again, and to Conan rather, instead of villainy. And we're going to talk about Thulsa Doom in that scene, you know, and this is a great scene where he comes by and he's talking to Conan, and he's genuinely puzzled, I think, because he's just like, okay, you broke into my house, you killed my servants and my pets, you know, and he starts to lose his cool that Conan killed his snake. He's just like, you know, that's what grieves me the most. You know, you killed my snake. He's not happy about that. And then when Conan comes back and says, you know, you killed my mother, you killed my father, you killed my people, you took my father's sword. Thulsa Doom, I think, has one of the great villain lines ever. And it's been used since that film and certainly before several times, but he doesn't even remember. He doesn't remember at all. And when I was rewatching the movie, prepping for this, it occurred to me that it reminded me very much of a very campy movie called Street Fighter, which is the height of like 90s camp, where they have Chun-Li is having a meeting with M. Bison, played by Raul Julia, and she goes on for a good 5 minutes about when M. Bison's troops came to her village and how these farmers beat him back and her father gave up his life and everything. And it's a very empowered, like, very strong scene that she details. And Bison just kind of goes, I'm sorry, I don't remember. And Chun-Li is just flabbergasted. She's like, you don't remember? And he has one of the best villain lines ever. And it reminds me of this scene in attitude. Thulsa Doom doesn't say this, but Bison says, the day Bison graced your village was the greatest day of your life. But for me, it was Tuesday. And it's just such a great line. And that is the attitude that Thulsa Doom has. He's just kind of like, oh, well, I did all this, and yeah, I guess that happened. You know, I used to go hunting for steel, but I don't remember. You know, and then he, you know, he's like, oh, steel used to be the most important thing in the world. And Conan recognizes what he's dancing around and says the Riddle of Steel. And Thulsa Doom says, yeah, the Riddle of Steel. You know, do you want to know what it is? It's the least I can do. And then he tells him, you know, steel isn't strong. Flesh is stronger. And then they have there's two really amazing stunts in this movie. And this one it just took my breath away. He turns to these followers that are just standing on this cliff, looking down on Thulsa Doom. And he picks out a girl and he just goes, come to me, my child. And she walks off the edge of the cliff and you see her fall all the way until she hits. And it's like a beautifully done stunt. And obviously it's some kind of trick floor, balsa wood or something like that. But it is an amazing stunt because normally you don't see people hit when you do something like that. You see, you know, they're jumping into a bunch of cardboard boxes or an airbag or something, so they don't really show you when they hit. They do a different cut or something. But this one is one shot, one seamless cut. You see her jump off the cliff and hit, and then it cuts away to like her, you know, a shot of her dead. And Thulsa Doom explains that that's strength and that's power. Then he segues into the quote that I used at the beginning of the episode, you know. And he essentially takes credit for forming Conan because he's like, look at the strength in your body, the desire in your heart. I gave you this. And then he's like, such a waste. Like you've come and you've thrown your entire life away. I made you essentially a superhero by killing your father and your mother and taking your father's sword and destroying your entire village and selling you into slavery behind the wheel of pain so that you could grow into Conan. And you've gone and just done something incredibly stupid and got caught, and now I'm going to have to crucify you. So it's really a messed up way of looking at the world, but it fits completely tonally with what this whole deal started with. That which does not kill us makes us stronger. And that kind of philosophy runs through the entire film. So Conan gets crucified on the Tree of Woe, which is aptly named. And what's interesting here is that is the midpoint of the film. But that is not the midpoint of the hero's journey that we're on. Because remember, we started the hero's journey a lot later when they were going into the Tower of Set. We said that was their ordinary world, and that the actual call to adventure started when King Osric said, hey, go get my daughter. So we're on an accelerated timeline now because this is the midpoint of the film. We've only got about an hour left, give or take. And, you know, we're going to start to pick up the pace dramatically. In fact, there's only going to be 2 more episodes talking about Conan the Barbarian and only 1 more episode talking about the film because there's actually not a lot left. There's some significant action and battle scenes coming up. So that soaks up a lot of time. But one of the things that has happened here that we went by is one of the things that happens in the Black Moment is a stage called Atonement with the Father. And it's when the hero will meet a father figure and have to be confronted and initiated by whatever holds the ultimate power in his or her life. Well, for Conan, that's Thulsa Doom. He is, you know, his entire life has been shaped by Thulsa Doom. All he wants is revenge to the point that he's left behind the woman who he loved and, as far as we know, the only friend he's ever had, to go chase the Thulsa Doom, and now it has come to a horrific end. A Black Moment, some people refer to this as the Belly of the Whale or the Dark Night of the Soul. It has a bunch of different names that they use for that and everything. But Conan gets crucified. There's a couple of crazy things that happens during this crucifixion scene. So I think they shot it in a day. And I remember when I was rewatching the movie going, wow, how long was Arnold hanging on that tree? And it turns out not that long. The tree is built on a Lazy Susan. So they could just keep turning the tree to make the shadows move, to make it look like he had been there, you know, for days. but really, he wasn't there that long. But then there's a bit of insanity that by now you should have come to expect this kind of craziness from the production team on Conan the Barbarian. So they have 2 real-life vultures kind of like chained to the tree and 1 animatronic kind of puppet vulture that's going to peck at Conan. And Conan leans over and kind of bites the neck of this vulture. Well, apparently they'd used like some real vulture feathers or something like that to make this animatronic puppet, and the vultures that they had chained to the tree had lice or fleas or something that were infesting the puppet vulture. So Arnold doesn't, when he talks about this, he doesn't really remember exactly what happened. He seems to think it was a real bird. But I don't think they would even do that. That seems really far-fetched, even for the craziest, the craziness that was in that production. But he testifies to people coming and having him gargle with antiseptic after every take that they did because of something going on with that vulture. So I was just like, at this point, you've come to expect that kind of craziness from Conan. And it's not over. There's more insanity to come. So he starts to hallucinate. He thinks he sees Subutai coming over the horizon to rescue him. He starts to laugh kind of hysterically and then passes out or maybe even dies. He's certainly at death's door at this point. And then, Conan kind of passes out. We get a reprise of the civilization music that Basil Polidorus had, subbing in for Subutai's theme, and then we realize that Subutai is actually there. He didn't disappear. He just kind of ran in between the valley of these two hills, so Conan couldn't see him anymore. And now he's crested the second hill, and he's running up, and he gets Conan and brings him back to the mounds, and Valeria is there now. And she's wearing the eye of the serpent around her throat as a kind of jewel necklace kind of thing. And it turns out maybe Conan's mostly dead. He might not be actually dead. And Mako, Valeria puts him to the test, and she's like, hey, how good a wizard are you kind of thing, And Mako answers, well, the spirits of this place extract a heavy toll. And she's just like, do whatever you got to do. I'll pay it, So Mako sets off to do this kind of resurrection ritual. He starts scrawling all these runes all over Conan, which I guess is taken from, Milius was inspired from a Japanese film that had a similar scene in it. And they put Conan on this kind of cot. He's kind of mummified almost. They've got him all these wrappings and everything. And just a quick aside about this cot. It was like a hydraulic cot so that it could lift Arnold and Valeria and Subutai as they were like on top of it. So it had some serious strength to it. And as a side note to that aside, the reason I know that is because there was a television show on Nickelodeon, of all things, called Ready, Lights, Camera, Action. And it was hosted by Leonard Nimoy. And again, you're like, why is this on Nickelodeon? They actually did an entire episode on Conan the Barbarian. Again, who are they marketing this to? This is a rated hard R film that received an X rating 3 times. Yet the making of it is on Nickelodeon. And it's something that I remember watching that episode and being fascinated, and they were showing how they did all the fake blood. They had to be in the swords because so many of the actors were not wearing clothing, where they were getting hit with the sword. So when you see somebody get hit with a sword, the blood pack's actually in the blade, and the fiberglass sword is collapsible, and it makes it look like you hacked into the guy and blood goes flying everywhere. But that's obviously not what happened. So it was just a quick aside there, but Mako seems a little bit skeptical that he can actually pull off this ritual, and he kind of says that, that the spirits might come tonight, and if they succeed, and Valeria kind of cuts him off, and it's just like, if they succeed, you follow. Like, she's not playing around. She's no joke, nothing. That night, the spirits do come, and this is another example of Valeria taking action, being kind of the backbone of the group, Mako is at first praying. He's doing some kind of like throat singing, like Tibetan throat singing or something like that. And as it gets more and more intense, the sky turns red, these spirits come down. These effects don't really hold up because they're like rotoscoped animated spirits that are on there. But who knows? It's their rotoscope frame by frame, and it tells very, very much so nowadays. But they might have done something horrific nowadays with way too much CGI and ruin the scene anyway. So the scene works. It implies that, hey, these spirits are coming down. But Valeria, when she sees the spirits, she doesn't even hesitate. Mako runs away and goes and hides. Valeria jumps on top of Conan's body and is fighting the spirits away. She's got a dagger in her hand. She can't really hit him, but it's not stopping her at all. Subutai only reacts at once Valeria engages with the spirits. So, and then they chase the spirits away. Mako proclaims, they're gone, and then Conan wakes up, and Valeria makes him this promise. It's really important because it'll come up later in the film. She says, if I were dead and you were still fighting for life, I'd come back from the darkness, back from the pit of hell to fight at your side. And I was just like, man, that is powerful. That's the kind of girl. Get yourself a girl that will come back from the pit of hell and fight at your side, guys. That's what you want to do. And it's a really, really powerful scene. Conan doesn't say anything. It's just kind of weird. He doesn't respond. You're like, okay, well, he just came back from the dead, which, by the way, in the monomyth, in the hero's journey, that stage is called apotheosis. And it usually happens right after the midpoint. It's where the hero will generally recognize that they're a hero. That, hey, we almost died right there, but we're okay. We came out of this. We can do this. That's usually the turning point of the story, where the hero starts to, and it's not always at the midpoint of the film, but it's where the hero realizes the divine within himself or herself, and takes it in. In the Matrix is a really, really good example. It's the scene where Neo doesn't run from the agent. The agent comes down, Neo sees the agent, turns, Trinity just made it out of the Matrix and the phone booth has blown up, and Neo turns, he could run, and then he turns back. And they look down, they're like, what is he doing? Why isn't he running? And then Morpheus says, he's beginning to believe. And that's the apotheosis. That's what it does. That's what it means, So Conan is back. He's back from the dead, or back from death's door, certainly. And he is ready to take on Thulsa Doom. He's made his mistakes. He's done what he's gone through all this stuff, but his allies have proved that they value him more than they valued the riches that King Osric offered him. The whole lifestyle of, hey, let's just spend all this money and chill out and let somebody else deal with Thulsa Doom. Subutai and Valeria are on board now. And it's not shown, but I have a feeling that Subutai got arm twisted by Valeria. Like, she was like, we're going after Conan. He's like, but we're rich and we talked about this. And she was just like, we're not talking about this anymore. Get your bow. Like, we're leaving now. But we get this scene where Conan is up on a mound and he's going through a kata. And it's meant to be reminiscent of the scene earlier on when he was training in what we'll call the prologue, which is not a prologue, it's actually, but when he was taken to the east, a great prize, is what Mako says. And they say, always there remained the discipline of steel. And they show him under the moonlight, it's dark, everyone else is gone, and he is going through this kata with a really long sword. And he's going through this other kata on now, very reminiscent of that kata. What's kind of interesting is that the moves he uses in this kata, there's one part where he kind of swings the sword and moves it around his body and comes down into a double-handed kind of slash and stops. And that move has been used over over and over and over again in a ton of movies since then to kind of subconsciously tell people this guy knows how to use a sword. And it became a telltale, like, signature move for Conan the Barbarian. Even in the next film on the Universal lot, all this like swinging and spinning the sword around came from that one move. And it's just kind of an odd deal. So when we come back for part 5, we're going to end our discussion about the 1982 Conan film and go over the assault on Doom's Mountain of Power, my favorite scene in the entire movie, the Battle of the Mounds, and then close it out from there. And then part 6 is going to be about the legacy of Conan the Barbarian. We're going to talk about Thundar and whether or not the Masters of the Universe has anything to do with Conan. We'll talk about the other movies that were made, the TV shows, the cartoons, all the other stuff that is building up to what's hopefully going to be a Game of Thrones type series by Amazon. So I hate to leave it there, but that's kind of what we have to do. So until next time, keep it clean and green. This is Quantum Froth Dispatches, and I'm Mike Haspel. Out. You have been listening to Quantum Froth Dispatches by Michael Haspel. Music and other cues are provided by The Fat Rat. The song you're hearing is Monody, featuring Laura Brem. If you would like to support the podcast, please visit www.patreon.com/QFD. Thank you for listening, and we now return you to your mundane reality.